Welcome, friends, to the Someone Gets Me podcast. I am your host, Dianne Allen, and I am so delighted that you're here. This podcast was created because I believe there is a visionary leader inside each one of us who is waiting to be seen. In each episode of Someone Gets Me, you will hear useful tips from successful visionaries who will share their stories about how being seen has allowed them to take their vision out into the world with action. Hi, everybody. Welcome back. It's Dianne here with an amazing guest for you. I met Danielle Gardner, I don't know, about a year ago, maybe longer now. And the first time I met her, I thought, wow, what an amazing presence. She just has a smile and a way of being that's amazing. And I've actually had some business conversations with her where she really, in just a few short moments, helped me out see things in my own world differently. So I invited her to be on the show today to share her wisdom, her journey, and her ability to tell stories great. Because we're in the storytelling series now, but there's so much more to her than just stories. So you're going to hear that plus some from Danielle today. Danielle Gardner is amazing. She is a business coach who really helps other coaches and practitioners, mostly, I believe, of kind of personal development and growth and health and that kind of thing, be able to articulate their message in a way that other people can hear. She also helps people market themselves with a sense of quiet confidence that really stands out. It's amazing how it stands out in the noisy world online. Like, my thought always was I had to be online all the time. And Danielle says, no, that's not the case. There's another way to do it. You don't have to be a slave to the rat race. So she's got some great ideas about how you can jump off the rat race and still have an amazing life. So Danielle, thank you so much for taking the time to be on the show today.
Well, thank you, Dianne. That has to be the best introduction I've ever had. I even got a bit teary then there along the way. So yeah, that was a really lovely introduction. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much. And I really appreciate you coming on the show today because you were one of the first people I thought of when I thought I'm going to do this series on telling stories and the genius behind just putting that message out in a way that's not like in your face. Because all of us who are visionaries and sensitive, things that are in our face can be a little off-putting, even if they have value. So I'd like to start a little bit of giving everyone a little bit more of an idea of who is Danielle Gardner? Where do you live? How'd you get to this place? Whatever you feel like saying is fine. But give us a flavor of who you are and how you got to this place in your life. And then we can go on from there and learn more.
Okay, so right now I'm in England, and for the last couple of years, my husband and I have been living in Spain, spending time in England as well, occasionally going back to Australia, which is where I'm from. And we both have online businesses which allow us to do that. And this making of this sort of lifestyle, the lead up to it was probably the very practical lead up was about 3 years. But let me just sort of back up the track a little bit. Before starting my business, I had been working for, about 15 years in recruitment and human resources and disability employment. And I remember, I enjoyed that initially, but the last few years before I finally ended up leaving, it was killing me. It was sucking the life out of me, and I just was so over office politics and working in offices that hadn't had a breeze of fresh air in them since the day the windows got put in, and just not even being able to open up a window, having to work under fluorescent lights and air conditioning and all of that kind of stuff. And I remember this day I was I had my corner office and I was looking out the window, and in the kind of across the road a bit was the Broadwater, it was called, on the Gold Coast in Australia. And I remember looking out there, watching the palm trees, and I was like, I'm just not meant to be here. Like, I'm just not, like, there is just something else for me. It was almost like I'm not meant to still be here, because I think it was certainly part of my journey, but it was almost like I'm not meant to still be here. I've got to move on. But I was very much stuck in the trappings of a well-paying job and everything that came with that, at a company car, and, it was just this whole mindset thing. How would I ever survive, pay the bills or whatever if I left and went out on my own? But meanwhile, I'd always been interested in alternative therapies and things like that. And I started studying kinesiology. And eventually I started offering that like on the weekends while I was still doing my job. But probably the big thing that set me up to sort of really make the move was there was this day that something had happened at home. Like my stepson was living with us. He said something that kind of rubbed me up the wrong way, which was, it was actually about, my husband was saying that we're going to go and live in Spain, like me and him. And my stepson went, yeah, whatever, you're going to live, like it was like that again, that whole you're going to live in Spain again, that's never going to happen type of thing. And that really kind of irritated me. And then I'm like, well, what are you doing, Dani? Like, it just made me sort of reassess things a bit and kind of even question, why I had never had a desire to have children of my own and stuff like that. And it was like, well, I want to travel and I want to learn other languages and I want to do it. And it was like, yeah, that's great. This dialogue with myself. And then it was like, so what are you doing about that, Dani? And I was like, well, ultimately I was living in suburbia doing the 9 to 5. And so that made me say to my husband, hey, this Spain thing, when are we going to do that? And just like that, he went April 2012. So to sort of shortcut the story a bit, this happened about 18 months before April 2012. So we had a bit of a lead up to sort of prepare for that. So I took 6 months leave without pay. He already had the capacity to work online, and we went and lived in Spain for 6 months, and it was so good. I was like a housewife for the first time ever and really loved it. And it also gave me an opportunity to kind of reassess my life. I just turned 40 and I was like, how do I want to spend the next 40 years of my life? And I basically went back to my job with a very clear plan. That I was going to ask to reduce my hours, or if that didn't happen, I would leave. I had a bit of a plan. And interestingly, within a week of being back, the company announced redundancies, that there was a significant change that had happened in the business and we were going to have to, make a lot of people redundant. And so they were asking for voluntary redundancies. And I was like, pick me. And so, yeah, I got my redundancy, and then that was basically at the end of 2012. And, I started to then, set up myself with a clinic, a little, hired a room in a health clinic kind of thing. And eventually, because I was kept thinking, well, I want to be back in Europe. I want to, I need to kind of work towards being able to have an online business so that I could move around. And gradually that started to happen. And then in 2015, we got a one-way ticket to London, and then here we are. And things have been really great. I mean, the first 40 years of my life were pretty predictable. I always knew where I was going to be, at any particular time of year. And now it's a very different life, because like even right now, kind of homeless, we don't actually have a place that is ours. We've just finished renting a place in Spain for 12 months. So yeah, it's a very different life. And I guess that's a bit of an overview. I've probably answered like the whole interview question in that little intro, but yeah.
Well, so it's magical to know that you've always wanted to travel, and then you're kind of stuck in suburbia. And then when you free yourself, it's like you say, well, I'm kind of homeless. I don't really have a place of my own now, with a big smile on your face. Like the freedom that comes with making a decision to follow your heart and do what you've always wanted to do is freeing on every level.
And I also want to add that it wasn't easy, some, family and friends, look at what we're doing and go, oh, I wish I could do that, and, they think there's something maybe special about, well, there's obviously something special about what we're doing, but something that's maybe special about us. And I was like, no, like you could make the same choice. It's not easy. you've got to sort of feel the discomfort and do it anyway. That's really kind of one of my mottos. That's the thing that's really taken me to a lot of places, you know. And what I notice is that in a lot of cases, people wait till they feel comfortable before they take action. And if I did that, I'd still be waiting. Like, I'd be waiting a really long time. So.
Right. It's having that courage and that guts and knowing it's not going to be easy. And the consequence, if you stay overly comfortable, you just kind of get seduced into mediocrity and not being happy, and that like chronic kind of low grade depression almost. And that's not a way to live life. And so when you want to live life really out loud, then it takes changing things.
Mm.
So how were you inspired to help people with their marketing and articulating their message? How did that all start?
Yeah, well, that's sort of interesting, because when I set out, I was very much the holistic practitioner, you know, studying. So I went out with kinesiology. I had learnt something called reconnective healing while I was on that 6-month break. So I started using that. And then eventually, or in that same year, I started doing intuitive work. So reading the Akashic records and helping people, using that as a tool. And what I was finding is that as I was learning to clarify my message, well, two things happened. It was sort of like I was attracting this sort of person that was very much like me. They were maybe in a job, or, you know, they were sort of like, they wanted to move into a more holistic sort of space, and they were maybe studying something or had studied something. So those people were coming to me not for me as any sort of business coach, but for, you know, just doing these holistic services. And then as I learnt that I needed to sort of refine my message and who I was talking to, and I started looking at who was coming to me. And the other thing that I think is just so important is that whoever we're kind of helping, like, life has actually prepared us to be a mentor to those people. So I don't think that you can just pull a target market out of the air. You know, you've got to look at your journey. So when I looked at my journey, and actually what had happened is initially I was working with a business coach, and they were like, well, why don't you just help people with their money blocks? Now, this is sort of like 6 years ago. And of course, like, even then, that was a lot. Like, now, that's every man and his dog wants to help people with their money blocks, right? There's a lot of money in helping people with their money blocks, I've noticed. But, you know, initially that excited me because I felt like I had a lot to offer. But then I'm like, but I'm not really making it much money yet. How can I claim to be, you know, helping someone? So again, there was like a lack of embodiment. It wasn't yet part of my journey. So I kind of backed up the truck and went, okay, but well, what have I done? What, you know, and I'm like, well, I have successfully left my corporate job. I have reinvented myself. So I sort of wound things back to, all right, I'm going to focus on that. Those people are coming to me anyway. And then as I just focused on that, I kind of moved away from focusing on leading my message with my modality, which of course a lot of people still do, because we don't know any better. I focused on the whole, you know, the reinvention part, but using all of my tools to help people with that. As I was doing that, I just found more and more these people wanted to start their own business or had kind of started. So I was just naturally started to help them with that, you know, and I'd always been pretty good with writing and putting words and language together. It's kind of evolved that way. And I was helping people in this kind of way for about a year before I actually, I don't know, it was like I had to get up the courage to call myself a business mentor or a marketing mentor, or, you know, messaging. I was sort of saying messaging and marketing mentor, but it was a bit of, I don't know, I didn't want to call myself that at first. I was, you know, saying I was a career reinvention mentor, among other things that I had done. So yeah, that's basically how that sort of transition happened to what I'm doing now.
Oh, that's amazing. I love the organic process of that. I love how it just kind of, I kept imagining you like floating down this river of life, and it just kept presenting you with opportunities and situations. And then you could see probably first intuitively how you could be in that space, but never really even calling it that yet until you get there, until the brain catches up, later, kind of thing. And that's a brilliant story, because you allowed it to come to you instead of trying to push or force something that maybe wouldn't even be fun for you to do anyway. I think that's really cool. I love that.
Yeah, and certainly learning to not push and force things has been such a big part of my journey and my medicine, So I know that you've probably seen that I talk about, slow business as well, that whole idea. And also, the idea of slowing down or aiming slower, for me, I've naturally done everything fast, walked fast, just everything basically fast, So it's not been my natural way to slow down. But now that I've become so much better at it, oh my God, like it's just changed everything. And you see, before I felt really, productive and high achiever and, getting lots of things done, but my well-being was suffering. I was waking up anxious a lot, and I'm like, why am I feeling anxious, And yeah, it was just piling a lot on my plate, working long hours. And it really wasn't until like all of that work I was putting in, it was like I still wasn't reaching my goals. I would get to the end of the month, and I wouldn't have my financial goal met, my 5 or 10K, because that's, in the industry, that's what you got to aim for, right? So it was like I didn't get it, and I didn't get it again, and I didn't get it again, and I didn't get it again, and then I just got disillusioned with goals, actually. But what happened is once I let go of income goals and I just focused on community building, because I thought I can do that. I feel like I have some kind of control over that. I didn't feel like I had any kind of, how could I really just get sales? Well, really, you've actually got to have a good foundation to work with anyway to get sales, and that's having a community, having an audience. So that was part of the sort of learning, like, okay, so I could actually not have these sort of really hardcore goals all the time and just sort of say, well, my goal is community building right now. How can I do that? What can I do today?
I think that's so important too, because especially more and more people are really wanting community and wanting to be connected to other people. That high pressure, high moving, always going lifestyle is the people who are the visionaries and the people who are struggling with anxiety and depression and all of that. That's the health consequence of acting like you're a machine, going without any rest or any calmness or any peace.
Yeah.
And it's like you're ahead of the curve in a lot of ways, because you're talking about things that a lot of people are just now starting to think might be an option. I'm hearing it a little bit here, more and more in little flavors of it, but I've been hearing it from you for a while. That's why we're going to make sure that your website and your Facebook and YouTube links are in these show notes so that you guys can check out Dani's work, because it's really amazing. I always, when I'm on Facebook and I see that you've published something, I stop and read it. It's one of the,
that's so cool.
There's yours. And then I have this amazing client that she's so precious. And she's always wanted to start a blog, and she's genius, right? Always wanted to start a blog, but she was afraid. And I go, come on, do it. And she had a friend saying, do it. So she did. And it's about food. And I'm not a foodie in that way. Like I don't read food stuff, whatever. But the way she writes and the way she does it, and it's all about a joyful food journey, that I can't wait for her blogs to come out. I'm like, where's the blog? And those are the two things I stop for. Other things I enjoy and I like, but when I see yours come out, I don't want to miss it. And it's because of that feel of I can take a breath and just be in this space with you as you, whatever you're sharing. It doesn't, sometimes I'm like, I'll be done reading. I'm like, I don't even know what I read, but I feel better. Then I have to go back and read it to like get the content, because I just love that feeling of that quiet confidence and that peace. And I think people are craving that more than anyone realizes. And some people are starting to really realize it. So I see you as a visionary in that way, for sure. There's no question about it.
Yeah, thank you. And I think, it's like if you can help people feel differently or think differently, I mean, that's probably the thing that's, I've had to, a lot of the stuff that I do naturally, I've had to kind of go, what am I doing? To sort of really help break it down for people. And really, as I look at my content, ultimately what I'm doing is helping people think differently. And I think in doing that, they're feeling differently.
Yes.
Yes. And so, yeah, that whole customer or like potential customer experience is really important. And it's sort of like it shows up everywhere in the type of images that we use, in the way we actually format our content as well, the way we space it out. That all has an impact on how someone feels, when they interact with us or encounter us.
And you just handed me the perfect segue where I wanted to go, and that is the art of storytelling, which is something that's very important to me. And you have a natural and skilled ability to tell a genius story without having to use 500 pages, single spaced. I can't read it. So I'd like you to share a little bit about your process of how you tell the story in a blog or help a client tell the story. But there's a strategy behind how you do this. There has to be. And I think it would be very important because and the reason why I'm asking all this is because story is really important. There's that fine line of holding on to the story and knowing the story and being willing to release the story and move on, right? So there's so many parts to the story. There's our belief systems. There's what we tell ourselves. All of it is impacted by how we think and how we feel. And you have a really great way of telling stories. And I would love to hear a little bit about how you do that and maybe give some tips to some people if they would like to add a little bit more of that quiet confidence to their storytelling. What could they do?
Yeah, and this would be an example of something that I do quite naturally. And then I've got to go, oh, what am I doing? Because it's really, there is no formula or anything like that, but I can tell you what I notice that I'm doing. I guess what I don't do is, like, there's a way that people share a story that can go too deep, right? What I notice, and that can be appropriate in some ways, like maybe in a book or something like that. I think that can be really helpful. But when I think in terms of sharing content that's going to grow an audience, then what I have noticed is when people go too deep into the story, what the result of that is a lot of sympathetic comments from people, like, I'm so sorry that happened to you, kind of thing. All right. And in my opinion, that's not what you want, because now that whole thing has become about you, right? And so the only reason I feel that we share our story is because it's relevant to our intended reader. I think there is this balance that's important, that, when I'm sharing something, at least in my opinion, I don't feel I'm going deep with it, right? Now, I guess when someone's had, I think maybe when someone's had difficult things like any kind of trauma or abuse or, divorce stories, this sort of stuff, it's pretty easy, I guess, to all of a sudden be going deep. But they're the kind of things that will generate the sympathy type of stuff. I guess I haven't, I guess I don't really broach any of those areas, but I certainly broach my own fears and things that have happened along my journey in terms of building my business and, following the crowd and feeling like, nervous about when I started to find my own way, feeling a bit nervous about even talking about that because I didn't want to ruffle other people's feathers, the feathers of other mentors that I admired and things, and, their communities that they were in. So the way I have been approaching storytelling from a content point of view is, I think there's a few ways. Like, sometimes it just literally is, the story follows I started here, I was thinking this, and then this happened, and then this happened. So I'm kind of taking them on the journey of the epiphany that I had. And so if I can take them along that journey and they get the same epiphany, that's going to be more powerful. And again, this happens pretty naturally, and, but it's like, it's a bit like, when someone says, you've got to read this book, you got to read this book. It's really good. This book. Have you read that book yet? Like you can tell someone like all the time, you got to read that book, but that's not really helpful. And that's the same thing. Like if someone doesn't have their own epiphany about why that book would even be interesting to them, then they're not going to be that interested. So I'm just trying to think of another example. Like, people might talk about meditation, and it's like, you got to meditate, like the equivalent of you got to meditate. Meditation is really important, blah, 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 meditation. Or you could insert any modality or something there, and people go, yep, got that, meditation. What else you got? Like, because it's not real new. It's not new. It's old news, right? But if you speak about an experience that you had, a difficulty or something, and then the way you got through that was through meditation, then the people who've got a similar difficulty, all of a sudden they want to do meditation, because so I think that's when I'm sharing the story, there needs to be, for me, a helpful aspect to it, if you know what I mean.
Yes. And I hear you when you're talking about sharing like the epiphany, like, yes, somebody might have that struggle and then they can see how you solved it. And so they're on the journey to the awareness or the solution or the growth or whatever without being told what to do or how to do it. And so once they're on the journey with you and they learn what happened for you, they can choose that or something else. But at least now they have hope that something can happen. They're not stuck, whether they actually do the meditation or the thing or not. And so it's kind of like you're doing a double service in that way where, okay, this is the journey and this is how we get to these great awarenesses. And this is what happened with me, and you may or may not have that same story, but there is a solution, there is a way, which then gives people hope no matter who they are or whether they even do it or not, because some people still might read it and do that, oh yeah, good, and keep on moving. And then, but they're going to remember it. You can't unsee something. So if they've read it or they've watched your video, they can't unhear your lovely voice later down the road, 5-10 years later or a year later or next week or tomorrow. Going, oh yes. Like I still remember things you shared with me and a conversation we had about my business. And I still remember like it was yesterday and it was a while ago because it sticks or it comes up in another place because it's about that epiphany. It's not about the thing. And that's one of your many geniuses, I think. And it's natural to you. And so that's what, for me, makes it so beautiful. It's the natural way. And you've learned how to see how your way is. And so therefore articulate it in a way that can show someone else how to do it.
And just to echo something that you're already saying, it's like marketing with or storytelling with them, not at them, and one of Seth Godin's little blogs one day that I caught, he had this statement like, I don't know what he was saying, like something about an intelligent or a conscious marketer is marketing with, not at, her audience. And I'm like, yes, absolutely. And even though I was already doing that to a degree, it really helped me rethink some of the things that I was saying as well. So for example, when we're sharing our story, we often need to say I did this and I did that and I. And that's fine. But what I look for now is where's the potential where I can take out I and put we. When this happens, we tend to think that blah, 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 and it feels inclusive. It's better than saying, do you do this? Are you feeling like that? Are you, do you really need that? Those ways that those, like marketing content can be. And it's very much pointing the finger. Are you doing that? Doesn't feel good. So that being inclusive, the we, marketing with is a really helpful thing as well. And so just the other thing I thought to mention is what I notice when people are sharing sort of like how-to kind of content, or blogs or whatever they feel like sharing. When you don't have a bit of your own experience in there, a bit of your own story, it doesn't penetrate as much, because that's what, as humans, we are wired for story. We learn things by story. So yeah, sometimes I see things that clients have written and I'm like, that's great. So let's weave in something of your own experience for that. And it's interesting that people can feel like it's not okay to do that, that they shouldn't be talking about themselves, type of thing. And of course, have to, like, once they kind of understand, like, stories are really helpful. That's how you can really, they will see themselves in your story. And if you don't think they can, then you're not sharing the right story,
Yeah, I so agree with that. And I'm laughing because when I was first, doing business things like years and years ago, and people were saying, tell the story, tell your story. And I'm like, well, what part of the story? Like, what do you even mean by tell the story? Like, I was like, so like, I didn't know. And then now I find great benefit, and I almost always speak in third person using we. So I'm really glad to hear you say that. But I love the idea of story for me, because I think it feeds our neurology to be connected to other people, that we are all in this together. There is a law of unity. We are all connected, whether we believe it or not. And so when we tell the story, even a piece of the story, then that tugs on a heartstring, or it resonates with different people in different ways, no matter what. And it's healing for us. It reconnects us to who we are. Mm-hmm. So there's a lot of power in the story, used in the right way, of course. And I love how the way you use story in a strong and very gentle way at the same time. There is a beauty in that balance that's natural to you in your storytelling and in how you're teaching people how to do storytelling through their marketing. So I think it's a genius thing.
Yeah, thanks. And I mean, one of the things that I'm doing, I guess, amidst telling stories is sharing some strong opinions or perspectives, and what's the feedback that I get is, what's helpful about that is it's like I give the background information as to why I believe that, why I think that, why I change that. And people understanding the background bit, they're like, right, so this is, she's really thought this through, and I can see this absolutely makes sense,
Mm-hmm. And so here you are, a visionary who's intuitive, who's a healer, who has had this amazing journey from the traditional suburbia gig to saying we're done, and creating a life. Like, I kind of see it like jumping over this big chasm, to jumping over the chasm of fear to get to the life that you enjoy, even when it's been difficult or challenging and wonderful. And every experience is part of that beautiful story of your life, right? And so I just think that is really amazing. So you have all these stories going on in your life, the stories you help each of your clients come up with for whatever their story is and whatever they're working on, and your own. Yeah. And the more we use stories in a supportive, helpful way, then the better it is, And so I love how you do that. I think that all of you listening ought to look for Dani's stuff on Facebook and check out that link, because she really, really does some amazing, amazing work. Her content is great. So what do you like to do for fun? I know you like to travel and move around, but what do you do day to day for a good time?
Yeah. So, I mean, one of my strong intentions right now is setting things up in my business in a way so I can spend less time online. Right. And so then that's caused me to think, okay, because like, if I create this space for less time online on my business, I can see that it's very likely that I would just fill that space with online stuff that's not for business. Do you know what I mean? So it's really made me think, okay, Dani, come on, like, what does unplugged living look like for you? And it's certainly something I'm still working on, but things that I really love to do, and where we are right now, it's such a great place for it. We are surrounded on 4 sides with greenery, hills, farmlands, all of that kind of stuff. And I really just love, one thing I love is kicking back on one of the recliners here and just looking, just seeing through all the windows and hearing the clock tick and hearing the wind, creak the house a bit. Like, it's the first time it happened, I was like, it almost like brought me back, like in the past, it was almost like I haven't experienced something like this moment in like years, like 30 years or something, you know. So those little moments are good. I really like gardening, or trying to be a gardener. I mean, I'm a gardener by marriage now. I'm just wanting to be. I've always had an interest in growing things, but one of my goals at the moment is to be a master basil grower. So I have had these visions before of having a food forest, you know, doing the whole permaculture thing. And but I was listening to a podcast once, and this lady was talking about growing food, and you know, talking about the kind of aspirations that someone like me has to do all this stuff. And she was like, just start by growing one thing and doing that one thing really well. And I thought, yeah, what an idea, right? And also, like, you know, when I think about what if everyone in like this community grew one thing really well, hopefully different things, you know, then you've got this abundance that you can share with each other as well. You know, it's like, yeah, go to Dani for basil and go to someone else for that. So I love that. I love going and seeing historical sites. So in England here, that might mean going to, you know, old, what are they, places like Downton Abbey. I've actually been there a few months ago to where they, you know what I'm talking about, the TV series?
Yes.
Yeah. So I went there. Oh my God, that was amazing. So I like going to places like that, seeing ruins, archaeological sites, that kind of thing. I love going to the movies. I'm such a movie buff, and I like to go to boutique cinemas. So ones that, you know, are just recliner chairs, or they're just done really nicely. And then there's things that I'm still working on creating space for again, because it's sort of got out of the habit a bit. I've got a guitar, and I've taught myself a few songs, and I've got some really good books that I want to have more time to, or dedicate. I do have time. It's just a matter of dedicating, you know, time to do that.
Oh, that's wonderful. So is that all of this that you're describing part of your idea of downshifting? Or is there more to the downshifting than what you just shared? I would like to hear about that, because, you know, you were sharing before we started recording about it, and it sounds like right up our alley, because most of us who are these visionary, high intense people can really benefit from, all right, how do we kind of ramp it down a little bit, you know, turn the dimmer switch down a little. We don't have to be running at full speed all the time. So what is tell us a little bit about downshifting and how that is. What is it?
Yeah, so I might just start by explaining a little bit about my journey, because when I started my downshifting journey, I didn't know that downshifting was a word or anything like that. So let me just tell you a little bit about it, and it'll kind of illustrate what it means. Mm-hmm. So back in 2009, with the global financial crisis, leading up to that time, my husband and I, we were renting big properties, you know, 4-bedroom houses, you know, with all the things, you know, and it was just me and him, and occasionally, you know, my stepchildren, but we were like using, I don't know, 20% of the house, right? So we had like lots of expenses, you know, just there was lots of waste going on. Anyway, because of the crisis and how it affected my husband's business, we had to really dramatically reduce our costs. And I had a little 2-bedroom unit that I'd been renting out for the last, you know, 5 years or so. That became available. So we moved from this big house with my stepson was living with us permanently at this stage, into a tiny 2-bedroom unit. And at the time, I thought it was just a disaster, you know. My stepson was at that age where he just wanted to play loud music, didn't seem really considerate, you know, and that kind of thing. So we were like bashing heads a little bit. And there was no storage in this place either, like hardly any. So, you know, we had like a garage, like it wasn't full, like, because we could still get the cars in there, but, we had stuff in the garage. We had loads of covered space everywhere. So we just had to do this big cult. We had to, we had this lovely big barbecue, on wheels, little tiled area on the, all this sort of stuff, bicycles, kayaks, all of that. We had to sell it or give it away. And, we really downsized or downshifted into this place. And what happened with that is then our expenses are lower to heat and everything. We actually had more disposable money, really. And that actually set us up to be able to go and live in Spain for 6 months initially. So really downshifting is about simplifying your life. It's kind of, it's taking a minimalistic approach. If you look at the actual definition, it talks about downshifters are exchanging high stress, high paid jobs for lower stress, lower paid, less hours, which normally means less paid, in order to have more time. But they're able to do that because they're downshifting everything. They're minimizing everything. So they're minimizing their expenses. So they actually don't need to earn as much. And I love that idea, Certainly it started, in Australia. And now I'm looking at, it's also because we're traveling out of suitcases, and it's still a quest to sort of, like, I'm surprised at what we can accumulate, even as sort of digital nomads. But now I'm taking this approach as well of downshifting and applying it to business. So I've already been doing that myself, but this year it's my intention to sort of start exploring that a little bit more, talking about it a bit more, about how we can be like downshifting entrepreneurs. Do we need to earn 6 and 7 figures? I know I actually don't. I may get to that, but I'm no longer going, I'm doing 6 figures this year or whatever, It's sort of like all of my needs are met. I'm able to travel. I'm able to do everything that I want to do because I'm a good steward of my money. We don't have loads of expenses. And so it means that, I don't have to work as much. I don't have to earn as much either. So, and I can make more room for these other, being more connected with nature or the natural world and these other things. So that's basically what it's about.
Oh, that's wonderful. And you just beautifully demonstrated your art of storytelling in telling us that story. It was just so beautiful. I followed along and could feel the epiphany coming and the awareness coming in your natural ability. And that's exactly why I asked you to come on the show, because you have such an amazing sensitivity and giftedness and awarenesses and brilliance in lots of different ways. And it all comes together in these beautiful stories and these beautiful ways that you paint the picture. And I'm going right with you as you're talking. I'm like, yep, I'm right with you. It's wonderful. So thank you so much for being on the show with me today. I love it.
Yeah, thank you.
I always ask at the very end if there's anything that your heart feels led to share before I close the show and invite everybody to follow you on your website and Facebook and that kind of thing.
Yeah, something did come to mind earlier, which was, if people are wondering, well, where do I even start? Which story, what, that kind of thing. A really helpful exercise to do is to grab a sheet of paper or open up a document on your computer and do 2 headings. What do I stand against? All right. So in other words, you could think, what really pisses me off about the world or about my industry or about people's lifestyle choices or something like. It's sort of like, get it all out. What is that stuff that you look at and you think, no, that's just wrong, So be like judgy, allow yourself to be kind of judgy to sort of access that information. And then once you have that list, then go, what's the opposite of that then? What do I stand for? And so then what you have is a real good foundation to actually start talking about some of those stories about actually what you stand for. So you don't have to necessarily focus on the what you don't what you stand against, although that will naturally somehow come in to when you're explaining what you stand for, when you're sharing what you stand for. So, yeah.
Well, and that's great, because when you're sharing what you stand for, the people who stand for the similar thing and they resonate with that will naturally be drawn to you without having to be screaming and yelling all over the internet to get their attention.
Yeah, and the other thing with that, it validates so many people who have thought the same, but maybe somewhere along the line were told, no, you can't do it like that. You're not meant to, especially in business, right? It's like, oh, thank goodness I'm not, crazy. Someone else thinks the same. So it's really helpful in that regard. Yeah.
Yes, a lot of hope comes out of it. I love it.
Yeah.
Well, thank you again for being on the show. I could talk to you much longer, but I know that we both have time constraints and we're paying attention. And our listeners, we want to be appreciative. So everybody, you've been listening to Danielle Gardner. Her website is Dani, D-A-N-I, Gardner, Gardner.com. You will find her there on YouTube and Facebook. Her links will be in the show notes for you to access, and please let her know that you heard her on this podcast, and feel free to reach out to her and follow her content. I promise you, you will be really grateful that you did. So remember, everybody, to keep your face to the sun so the shadows fall behind you. You're a rock star with great vision and a great purpose. So go out there and live your purpose on purpose. Until next time, be well. Thank you for listening. I trust you gained some valuable inspiration and information. Please join me and other visionaries in the Someone Gets Me Facebook group. Or for more information on my services and additional episodes, visit someonegetsme.com. Again, thanks for listening.